Good evening and welcome to the Monday night edition of the People Show on intellectualradio.com, iHeartRadio, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Thank you very much for joining the program. And we have a jam-packed program for you tonight. We're going to be talking with Dr. Kimberly Dulaney in just a few minutes. We're going to be speaking with her. And then we're going to be talking with Danielle Perry from the Chicago Food or the Greater Chicago Food Depository a little bit later on in the program so that we could explain or certainly share with you what is coming in the SNAP changes on the program, and as a result of the what I call the Big Bloated Bill. But first, we're going to be talking with Dr. Kimberly Dulaney, former Vice President of Education and Programs on the DuSable Museum. But the first thing I want to do is I want to get with and talk to you through my new segment, which I call the Daily Chronicle, which brings you some good little tidbits. Did you know that today was Cranky Coworkers Day? Well, we've all had some cranky days and probably worked with a few cranky people as well. So take a moment to laugh off old complaints, share a few grumbles, and show that little humor goes a long ways on the Cranky Coworkers Day. And this, I want you to figure out the answer to this. And if you have the answer to this, put it in the chat, or you can say it later. What am I? I was first invented during the Victorian era. Visitors could come, twist, or pull me to produce a pleasant jingle. During the Industrial Revolution, I was mechanized through the work of a Scottish engineer named William Murdoch, who devised a system using pipes and compressed air. I eventually went electric in 1831 and gained widespread prominence in 1913. When electricity became common in homes, the only problem was that I now produce an annoying buzz. Engineers soon worked to improve my tone and reliability with better materials and designs. By the 1930s, I once again gained like a pleasant chime, what am I? That's your riddle for today. And of course, later on in the program, I'm going to give you my quote of the day. On this date, 1795, Pinckney's Treaty, also known as the Treaty of San Lorenzo, was signed between the United States and Spain. It established the United States' southern boundary at the 31st parallel and granted America's free navigation of the Mississippi River through Spanish territory and tax-free temporary storage of goods in New Orleans. On this day in 1938, DuPont announced that its new synthetic polyamide fiber would be called nylon, unveiling a material that would revolutionize textiles. And on this day in 2004, the Boston Red Sox swept the St. Louis Cardinals in 4 games to win the World Series, capturing their first championship since 1918 and ending the infamous curse of the Bambino. And there it is. And of course, later on, coming on the program, we're going to be giving you our quote of the day. Well, before she joins the program, I want to just give you some background on it. Now, look, you all have heard me talking about all week through social media, making posts about the DuSable Museum of African American History. The DuSable Museum of African American History was founded by Margaret Burroughs and some other activists in 1961. This is an institution that is very important to the Black diaspora. It's a place to tell our stories and to put our history, and we control the narrative of what our stories are. Now, my questions and my query about the DuSable Museum is not pointed at getting anyone. I don't know the president of DuSable Museum, Irma Perry. I don't know her, and I know of some of the board members of there, and I'm going to talk about my thoughts on that. But my main inquiry is that we, as the Black community, must be concerned about our institution. That is the people's institution. And there is something amiss, in my judgment, going on in that institution. And I am raising questions about it, and I am bringing it to your attention in hope that you would do the same thing and be concerned about what is going on within the administration of that institution. That institution does not belong to the people who are there, that it's entrusted to manage it and to oversee it. It belongs to the people. And in 2018, when I was on terrestrial radio, when I was on the radio at another radio station, 8 of the board members, including Chance the Rapper and his father and other people, walked off of the board. They resigned and walked off the board in 2018. We were not allowed to talk about it. We were told not to talk about it. There was a memo that was sent out directed by the owner of the station that we cannot talk about this issue. I believe that that was a bad decision, because as purveyors and people in the media, we have a responsibility for providing you with information, with facts of what is going on that impacts our communities. And not to talk about it sends a signal that there is some reason to cover up for something or someone. So I've been very concerned about what's going on within the administration of the DuSable Museum, and of this latest turn of events of the termination of Dr. Kimberly Dulaney. It just brought it back to my attention. And so I reached out to Kim Dulaney and asked her if she would be willing to talk about this. I know that there are other inquiries going on to maybe legal issues and that sort of thing. But again, and she said that she is open to coming on and answering some questions. So we're going to delve into this. I'm going to find out from her perspective, as to what happened with her termination and what her concerns were. I know that my organization, 10 by 10 to Win, participated in what I thought was a phenomenal event of Juneteenth 2 summers ago that was started by Dr. Dulaney, and it was a fantastic event. We were very proud to be a part of that. So Kim Dulaney, just for you all to know, she lives in Chicago, Illinois. Her writings, which include children's books, poetry, fiction, and creative nonfictions, have been noted on ABC, CBS, MTV, and various other news programs, as well as numerous magazines and newspapers, including Newsweek, Rolling Stone, Essence, The Undefeated, New York Times, Chicago Tribune, Chicago Sun-Times, and USA Today. Dr. Dulaney has a BA in African American Studies, an MFA in creative writing, and in education, doctorate in educational leadership and curriculum foundation. Our focus are in the areas of Black creativity, production, and popular culture, African American Studies at the Chicago University in 2021. Most recently, she served as the Vice President of Education and Programs at the DuSable Museum of African American History, and she was at the DuSable Black History Museum and Education Center in Chicago. She currently works as a cultural critic and consultant Her literary works in progress include Beliefs, Black Boys in Urban Education, and interpretive biography of Reverend Dr. Jeremiah A. Wright, Jr., and Time Out. So just to give you all some background on the depths of her education and experience, I want to welcome to the program Dr. Kimberly Dulaney. Kim, welcome to the program. How you doing?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me today. I appreciate
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here for this conversation that I believe is so important to all of us as to what's going on in with the DuSable Museum. So can you talk to us and give us some background of, I read this article that you were terminated. I was devastated to hear of that because I know that your tenure started there. So tell us about what your tenure was there and how this all came about, and then we can get into the discussion.
Okay, well, you think you were devastated. I was devastated because I came to DuSable. I wasn't looking for a job when I came to DuSable. I was a professor at Chicago State University, and I was over the African American Studies program over there. And that's where I had been for some years. So I wasn't looking for a job. I came to DuSable to help DuSable, and I've been involved with DuSable just for the sake of Dr. Burroughs' legacy for a while. Before I went to work there, I was on a committee that was created with Comrade World and some other leaders in the city who had a committee to save DuSable. And that committee is kind of how Perry Irma got there, because they were saying they couldn't find a Black person to lead the museum, and we demanded that they look further, that they further the search and look for somebody, because the rumor was then that it was going to be subsumed under University of Chicago, and we didn't want that. We thought it should be independent and that the leaders should be independent. And we, again, didn't try to dictate who was chosen. We just wanted it to be a culturalist. That's what we wanted, and a Black person. But I think this is a great lesson for Black people to learn that Black skin don't mean Black people. Like, you might not be familiar with the culture. You might not be led by the cultural undergirding things that make you make decisions for the culture. So I came to DuSable when DuSable sought me out to come there to help. It was a time after the board members had left. It was, I think, the second shift of employees, the second set of employees had been let go. And it was the start of COVID. I had created the online programming for Chicago State University's African American Studies Department, so I could do some online programming for DuSable, which we did. And at the time, it was the pandemic, so we brought in some experts, did Black RX, and talked about those things. And so for that first year there, when I was over there part-time helping out, I was still a professor. Within that year, Perry Irma was trying to get me to come full-time, saying, we really need you full-time. The work at DuSable was full-time work. I was pretty much the only person in the department at the time and doing all the work. So at the year mark, Chicago State was questioning me staying over there even more time, and DuSable was wanting me more time. So I was convinced to take early retirement from Chicago State from my professorship to come over and fill this need at DuSable. And so, again, I said, you were surprised. I was very surprised because I left a career position to come help, quote unquote, save DuSable and help build DuSable back, to bring any social capital I have back to DuSable, to bring excellent programming to DuSable, to kind of shore up the public trust and show that we're going to be about the business of this cultural work and do this work. That's why I was brought there. I came there in 20. I came full-time, and I came in March of 20, I think it was, part-time. I became full-time after my academic term ended in 21. So like May maybe May or April of 21 is when I became full-time at DuSable. And so since I've been there, I've done a lot of work I'm pretty proud of. I brought in, we became co-producers of a film about Equiano, which is a very important story that I had taught in English. I brought in the Emmett Till exhibit. I consulted on that and brought that exhibit there. I brought in DuSable's first children's exhibit with Dolores Cole's generous exhibition that she created for DuSable, because we talked about the Children's Museum being downtown on a Zoom one day, and I told her, yeah, I used to bring my kids to that. That's great work. I even had their birthday parties there, and she and I and her staff talked about something being on the South Side for kids in small size where they could learn. And then she just went and created this awesome exhibit that cost over $1 million. And she created that exhibit and sent it to me and said, if we had this exhibit, would you take it? So I talked to Perry about it, and we didn't have anything for children. So we took that, and it's called The Many Colors of Us. It's been over there. She worked with other scholars from Loyola and things she had worked with. And so we did that. We've done a lot of things at DuSable, in addition to starting the Juneteenth community barbecue, which the community basically pays for. I'm very proud of that we kept it free. Once so many people came, people saw it as a money-making opportunity, but we don't want to charge people for freedom. So we wanted to celebrate freedom, and we have everybody contribute something. So people who can contribute money, organizations contribute money, other people contribute time. We've had great partners for that. We've had great partners for King Day. I brought in community partners that hadn't been there in a long time. I also brought in, I found my own funds to fund educational programs, as much as one grant for $215,000, to fund my own education programs there. So, so I'm very proud of the work that I've done at DuSable, and I'm quite saddened by this demonstration of lack of appreciation for all that I brought to DuSable.
Well, listen, I know that you and I have become closer over I would probably say the last 7 to 10 years or so. Yes. I've known of you since the early 90s when you had your children's bookstore at, I believe it was 22nd in Michigan, because your cousin was my clothing designer at the time.
Okay, yes.
So that is how I first known of you. And then, but I've been, concerned about the DuSable Museum because this is the People's Museum. It's our place that 64 years ago, Dr. Margaret Burroughs and some other activists working along with her created this institution. Yeah. And I believe that we are all, it is incumbent upon all of us to protect the institution. Now, as I started out saying, I don't have a personal interest in any one person within that administration, because I don't know them. I don't know the people of the administration, but I know that there is a problem when you have 8 board members that decide to resign at the same time amidst allegations of misappropriation or misuse or mismanagement of funds. And all too often in our community, we have these knee-jerk reactions, or we tend to try to amass these responses to a crisis when in fact to try to resuscitate something when it's too late. I don't think that is the case with the DuSable Museum, but I'm raising the question now in hopes that we can expand this inquiry to do something about whatever the situation is, so that infrastructure can be stabilized and maintained strong for the community, and not for any one personality or one's personal idea that it actually belongs to them. And it sounds to me that there may be a little bit of that going on. So give us some context. You sent me a timeline of concerns that are very concerning and need to be looked into, and certainly need to be investigated. And the community needs to be raising questions to the board and to the administration about coming clear. So give us some context of what happened with your situation, and what were the fire alarms for you.
Yeah. So I should say again, I went over to DuSable actually on some Black Power stuff, feeling like, okay, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to work with this powerful historic museum, and we're going to take things that I've learned from academia and spread it to the public. So that was the goal, to do great work. And again, we were on that trajectory. I think the problems didn't come in at DuSable until it became some money problems, right? So DuSable didn't give me a budget. And I said, I can't do program without budget. I'm getting everybody to come do everything for free, even flying from out of town, use their own money for free. But I needed a budget. So I asked in a meeting one time, if I raise my own money, can I keep it? In a staff meeting. And Perry Irma said yes. Then I began to raise my own money. The problem
what does that mean when you say raise your own money? You raise the money, that money comes through the institution, or you get that money and what does that mean?
Department will get that money to use for educational programming as we see fit in our department, if I bring the money in myself. And so I was intentional about being a good steward over that money. I'm very frugal, and so that's how I acted. That's how I functioned in the department. That's how I functioned in my life. And so I just wanted to use the money wisely. And where the problem came in is occasional. One major problem was Perry had a vendor that she's very close to, and she put the vendor in on a project of mine. She's making me use the vendor, and the vendor is charging me 3 times or 2-3 times what I would pay for it. And I said, why are you making me use that? I already have the direct contact, and it's much less, So I went to the board on that because I tried to talk to Perry, but she insists on putting this vendor in on everything, and the vendor is just getting a check for work we already have covered. And so I went to the board to complain about that. That was the problem for Perry. I went to the board because when I got the $215,000 in, Perry started making plans of things to do. And I'm saying, boy, hold on, that's education money. You said if I bring it in, we get to keep it. She's saying it's not earmarked. I'm like, oh, it's earmarked because I brought it. You said if I bring it, then we can use it for education. So again, I'm trying to grow the department and do work in the department. And it's only so long you can call on favors from people to come do everything for free. At some point, we have to start giving honorariums and paying people. So I was trying to raise money for that and to expand the programming. And again, sometimes I created, Mark, what I did was a shopping list of programs, and I would show that to funders to get people to fund so that they could be clear, because DuSable had created a bad reputation for mishandling funds. DuSable had been sued for mismanagement of funds, of grant funds and things like that. So nobody too much that I encountered was giving money to DuSable. So to work around that, I started saying you could give money to this specific thing, to this specific project. You could give money to this specific project. And was a shopping list, basically. And on the shopping list, this program might be $25,000. This one might be $5,000. You could pick what you wanted to fund. So Perry saw that, and she told me to give her the list. She started shopping the list out. But I later found out sometimes she was getting people to fund those things but she wasn't giving me the funds. You know, she was, and I was getting somebody else to pay for the event because I didn't know she got funding. Then she later requested that I write a statement to the people to tell them how their money was spent, and I hadn't got the money. So I said, I can't write that because I didn't receive those funds. I got XYZ to fund that. So I can't write that. All of those things became clashes, but it was mostly around money things. Yeah.
Well,
And so
certainly the
then I went to the board to complain. The board didn't do anything about it. Well, let me say, I went to the board and the board wasn't able to, I don't know, I'm not going to say they didn't do anything because I don't know what they did. But what I know is it didn't come to my department, whatever they call themselves doing to fix it. And then one of the board,
who is responsible? Who is the responsible agency or responsible entity for distribution of funds that are granted in? Who's responsible for doing that? So for the education, if somebody gave $1,000 for the education,
I would say our finance department gets the money, but Perry runs the museum. So, you know, she dictates to everybody what happens, but the finance department gets the money in, and they're responsible for keeping tabs of the money and how the money's spent. Again, the dictates of things come from Perry. So that's why I went to the board to make the complaint. Then I met with the board, and the board did say in the meeting that I get to keep the money for my department. They said that, but then I was never allowed to use the money. The board did say I got to keep it. You know, Patrick McGee was the chair of the department, and he told me next time, rather than writing, because Perry come in the office, she came in my office, cursed me out, you know, screaming, banging on my desk and everything. So I filed a complaint against her. And then they said I didn't have to report to her for a year. It was about a year. But when they got rid of the replacement board chair, which the guy who replaced Patrick was Franz Mullen, and when they kind of got rid of him, as I was told by Sandia, one of the people on the board, she told me in a meeting, she said, we didn't like him talking to you, so we chastised him for that. And that's why he's no longer on the board. She told me that. And so I had a grievance in, though. It's his job to talk to me and try to work it out and to attend to the complaints in the grievance. That's what you would think a responsible person would do. But the board just, you know, for the most part, not everybody on the board, but the majority of the board came with the replacement that you talk about when those people walked out. And those people are dedicated to Perry. And they say we stand behind Perry Irmer, not behind the way the museum functions, not behind anything you ask them to attend to. It's just about personality for them. It's about the person. They're picked by Perry, they're appointed by Perry, and they're told what to do by Perry to me. They might dispute that, but that's the way it pans out. And so if you have a problem and you take it, they do not address the issue. They do not they just say, we stand with Perry, no matter what. You know, it's kind of appealing in a ride or die hood kind of way. Like we just ride or die with this person, but it doesn't work well for an institution that relies on public trust and relies on good stewardship or fiduciary responsibility. It doesn't work well for that. And so because they didn't seem to be able to regulate Perry and to stop her retaliation against me, I filed formal complaints with Kwame Raoul's office. I've sent a letter to the mayor. I sent a letter to the alderman. And first I called the police, actually. Mark, I called the police and I'm like, who do you file the complaints with this? This lady is doing these things. And the police directed me to other agencies to file a complaint with. And then they also directed me they said, since it gets public funds, you should send a letter to this. I talked to mentors and other elders who had dealt with similar things. I talked to the community because, again, it's not me it's not a personality thing. I'm trying to function responsibly in accordance with the community as I understand it. So I talked to community people who had been leaders, respected leaders, and they all advised me in this way. The law, the police advised me in this way. So I wrote letters of complaint. Then I told HR that I wrote a letter and that I was going to be doing an interview soon with the Kwame Raoult's office. I sent her an email and said, is there anything that I'm not allowed to do? Because I did file formal complaints. I'm going to be speaking with Alderwoman Taylor, Jeanette Taylor, and I'm going to be speaking with the IG's office. And I will say they were responsive, and I did talk with them, and I greatly appreciate that. They have information, and they said they were going to be attending, getting something started on it. And then I got fired. And I got fired.
We're talking with Dr. Kimberly Dulaney, who is the former Vice President of Education and Programs. Kim, this conversation obviously needs more time. I've got another guest that's coming on. I'm wondering if you can come back on with me at the top of the hour so that we can continue this conversation at 8 o'clock.
Let me say one thing. I want to say to the people to watch out for, in honor of Margaret Burr's birthday, November 1st. On November 2nd, Margaret Burr's Legacy Committee is having a town hall meeting on Zoom. And we're asking for people to come in and help be a part of the solution.
Okay. All right. We'll continue to announce that later on. So you're going to come back at 8 o'clock. Okay. So another 30 minutes so we can continue this conversation. Okay. Kimberly Dulaney will be back with us in about 30 minutes. We're going to switch gears here to another very, very important topic that is important to us that's coming up. My guest is Danielle Perry, who is the Vice President of Policy and Advocacy for the Greater Chicago Food Depository, and she is here. We want to talk about what is going on. You all know about this big, bloated, ugly, insensitive piece of legislation that is cruel, in my opinion, on its face, and a lot of people who need the help is going to be hurt if something does not happen. But I'm glad that we are here in a blue state because we're going to find a way to make sure that people who need assistance gets that assistance. However, you need to be aware of what those changes are that are coming if something does not happen. And so I want to welcome to the program Danielle Perry. Welcome to the program, and thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I wish we were meeting on some better circumstances, but unfortunately, we are not. The SNAP benefits are getting ready. There are cuts in the SNAP program, and some of those cuts are about to go into effect, and some unforeseens are about to go into effect if something doesn't happen in Congress in the next 4 or 5 days. November the 1st, we're going to see some drastic cuts. So can you give us some of the details of what is going to affect people who get current SNAP benefits as a result of the Big Bloated Bill?
Sure. So the bill cut over $200 billion to the SNAP program as a whole. There are lots of different cuts. I could spend the rest of your show talking through them, but I would say there are two big cuts to the bill. First, federal benefits for SNAP have always been 100% paid by the federal government, but the bill changed that. Now states will have to possibly pay part of the benefit. Illinois right now, based on our payment error rate, we would have to pay 15% of the federal benefit for SNAP to maintain the SNAP program in the state. 15 sounds small, but that would be about $700 million a year that the state would have to pay to keep the program. So the brilliance of this bill is that they didn't just say, oh, we'll cut it for some people or others. They instead shifted the responsibility onto the states. So if the state doesn't pay it, it will look like the state opted out of the program. It's a match. So if we don't pay the 15% as the state of Illinois, The federal government won't pay the 85%. And then all 1.9 million people in the state of Illinois would lose their benefits. And it would be looking like the state did it, though it's the federal government that even initiated all of this. So that's the big first.
So it's 50, so the 15% is 15% of what amount? What's the total amount of the budget for the state of Illinois?
For the state of Illinois, it brings in $4.7 billion a year into the state for SNAP.
Right. So in other words, so the state has to find a way to pay that $700 million in order to get the other $4 billion or whatever that number equates
Basically.
to.
Yeah. And if they choose not to do it, I mean, this is a decision of the General Assembly. This, we assume, like you said, we live in a blue state and we're grateful for that. But that also puts us in a position where often we'll just assume that they'll just take it up. This is not something they've ever had to pay for before. So we have to advocate that they find a way, that they find the money, that they pass a bill, that they put it in the budget. And it's something that we will be advocating for in the next legislative session. So it's important that we call that out and name that, because otherwise we will look like other states that have completely abandoned this program if we don't figure that out. So that's the first big part, the cost shift to the state. The second is coming in a matter of, I would say, days, if you really think about it. There are work requirements for SNAP, and there always have been. You have to be a working person to receive SNAP. But there are some exceptions. There are people who don't have to do it. One of which, a big one, is people who are disabled. But there were a number of other exemptions from the requirement, one of which being veterans. They were exempt from having to prove that they were working the 80 hours that are required. People who are experiencing homelessness, former foster youth, our seniors, people who were over 54 years old, and also people with children, 0 to 18. But the biggest exemption of them all were that states were exempted if they had very high unemployment rates. Illinois was one of them. We applied every year to have a waiver from the program of having to prove that people were working those 80 hours to maintain their benefits. The Big Beautiful Bill changed so many of those exemptions I just named. So veterans, no longer exempt. People who are homeless, no longer exempt. Former foster youth, no longer exempt. Seniors, they changed the age from 54, now it's 64. And kids, if you have children, you were exempt. Now they defined a child as 0 to 14 in this new bill. And then the states completely lost their waivers. So our unemployment rate didn't change, but they got rid of the fact that we will now have to prove that each of the people receiving SNAP will be working. The state has estimated that 450,000 people will be impacted by this change, and they now will have to evaluate who is working and meeting those 80 hours and who is not. The federal government says they must begin doing that December 1st. So the state's going to have to stand up a whole mechanism to evaluate work December 1st. And you can only be unemployed and receive SNAP 3 months every 3 years. Say that again, 3 months every 3 years, you can have less than those 80 hours a month worked. So I'll give you an example. If I lost my job today and I started on SNAP in November, if I'm unemployed in December and still looking for a job, in January and February, I've now depleted those 3 months that I can be an unemployed person on the program. And now
For 3 years.
For 3-year fixed periods. And so this is going to devastate families. And a lot of people don't know it's happening. December 1st is when the state will start evaluating. So what we're telling people is you need to reach out to IDHS, call their hotline for SNAP, go in person, do what you have to do to make sure they have up-to-date information about your employment. And if you are not working the 80 hours, the other options are you can volunteer the 80 hours, you can be in an approved SNAP workforce program, or if you're receiving unemployment, you can let them know that you're receiving that. So you have to work the 80 hours, volunteer the 80 hours, or be in some kind of workforce program, or be in unemployment.
Could there be a combination? Could there be
It
a
can be a
combination of them?
So
Like if they work 35 hours, they can volunteer 5 hours?
That's right. Because a lot of these folks are hourly employees. They want you to believe everybody's at home sitting on the couch collecting benefits. We know the majority of the people who are eligible to work and can work do, but a lot of them also have hourly jobs, and I can't control my schedule if I'm an hourly worker. So if, let's say you get 20 hours this week, but 15 hours the next, 12 the week after that, and 10 the week after that, you're a working person. You want to work, but you weren't scheduled 80 hours. So let's say you only got to 45, you could volunteer the others. Also, if you just haven't found a job, you could try to get into an approved employment and training program. So this is the information I think is important to tell people. Update your information. If they currently have you as unemployed, in December, you will be unemployed, and that will be your first month looking like an unemployed person in the SNAP program, and you only have 3 months to do that every 3 years.
And this goes into effect on December the 1st?
December 1st.
So this is in the new bill, folks. So this is not something that is going to be changed at any point in time soon. So you've got to make sure that you have your records straight and you verified. Where would they go? Where are they responsible for going to verify updating their records?
So IDHS, the Illinois Department of Human Services, they're the ones who administer the SNAP program. They are the only ones who could tell you, if you speak with a caseworker, whether, like, what income do they have for you right now, and for you to send in documentation to them to make sure they have updated information on your income. It would be IDHS, a caseworker. I don't have the hotline at my fingertips, but I can get it to you and you can share it with your listeners. And hopefully you will share it consistently, because this is something that I think can truly, truly impact people. We're preparing for March 1st, because if people do not update this information, December, January, and February, they will deplete those 3 months. And then after that, they will not have access to the benefit until they are working again, or until they can prove that they've met those 80 hours.
So let me just say how serious this is. Now, even though that Illinois is a blue state, a great portion of Illinois in the rural areas are red communities. Now, red communities disproportionately, and rural communities disproportionately, get SNAP benefits. Disproportionately get SNAP benefits. And they are going to be in serious trouble because, unfortunately, conservatives, Republicans, MAGA, whatever they call themselves, they are not interested in resolving problems. This is going to be resolved by, largely, Democrats are going to resolve this problem. That is going to impact everybody. So, but that means that we have to find the $700 million or the $800 million, which means that they have to put this in the appropriations, and then they have to appropriate it through taxes. So that means that the rest of us are going to have to pay a little bit more to make sure that people who need the help and services get them. So when they come out and we have to pay a little bit more, just know that we're paying a little bit more so that people don't starve to death. Because I know that a lot of times we want to hammer, the governor or the mayor or whomever over the head because we have to pay a little bit of taxes. Well, if we want services, we've got to pay for them, and the only way that we pay for them is that we appropriate them through taxes. That's the way that it works.
And I would just offer that, what do you think happens when $4.7 billion that used to come into our state doesn't? What happens to the local grocery store? What happens to the small market? What happens to the corner store where people use their SNAP benefit? And often that's 25, 30, 35% of that store's revenue. What do? They fire people. They increase prices on people like us who go to the store and may not have this benefit. Or the big box store that we struggle to get into our community will come out. They will leave because that's too much of a loss in revenue. So we have to also think about the economic impact that this has. And for the person who thinks, I don't get SNAP, this doesn't matter for me, it does. It impacts you either on the end that you were just talking about, Mr. Wallace, paying the taxes, or it impacts you in the store when these people can't. 450,000 people possibly losing their benefits on March 1st. That will impact the stores in a matter of months. And what will that happen? It'll drive up costs at the store for us in a matter of months. So it's important that we think about that. And to your point about downstate, they have whole neighborhoods with 75-80% of people on SNAP. So what do you think happens to a store in that case? They close.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is it's a cycle, right? That in many of these instances, those dollars that come into those retailers, that's the difference between them profiting or not and having to close. And if they have to close and shut down, that's several jobs that are lost, tax revenue that is lost, as well as the rest of us, we don't have access to being able to go and to purchase goods and services, and we have to go somewhere else to get goods and services, which creates another problem. And it also creates a criminal element, because people who are living, breathing human beings that cannot feed themselves will find a way to feed themselves. I say this all the time, that this is not about somebody, the difference between bad and good. If you put and take whatever one would label as being the best person that you know and put them in a desperate situation where they cannot take care of their basic needs through normal means, I promise you that they will find a way to meet their basic needs, and it may be in a way that they would not normally do that. So this creates a much wider problem than just somebody losing some benefits for all of us. So it is incumbent upon all of us, whether we receive the benefits or that we don't, in some way or another. If I don't get a SNAP benefit, I am a beneficiary of these programs because it is creating economic infusion into our economy. SNAP benefit people are not people who are just weighing on the government. They pay taxes as well. They pay taxes. When they go buy goods and services, they pay taxes on them. They may not pay them on the SNAP benefits, but because of those SNAP benefits, because they work, they have a job. And so they are contributing to our economy. And I need for us to understand and look at this in a much more holistic way than what is being portrayed by people who want to take these benefits from people who need them and give them to people who don't need them. This is simply taking food from the mouths of people who need it to give wealthy people an additional tax cut that is not going to make any difference to their lives whatsoever. What are some of the other programs that are going to be impacted in the timeline with this bill?
Well, for us, SNAP is the number one thing that we're focused on. I know Medicaid had a lot of cuts, but Medicaid gets a lot of airtime as well. So we, the Food Depository, obviously we are the biggest provider of food to the pantries, soup kitchens, and shelters in the Chicagoland area. And so for every meal we provide, SNAP provides 9. So though people look at us like the provider of food for pantries, we also are big advocates and proponents for the SNAP program. I know this bill hits people in so many different directions, but SNAP is the number one thing that we focus on and advocate for. And unfortunately, we were all so focused on the bill And then now the shutdown is happening. So we at the Food Depository are we were already preparing for long lines because of the cuts in the bill around March. But now we're preparing literally this week for the shutdown on November 1st. We will see 1.9 million people in the state of Illinois lose their benefits if the administration does not decide to have USDA use their contingency funding to go ahead and fund the SNAP program as they legally should and have the authority to do. They're making a decision not to open up the SNAP program and keep funding it with the funds that they have to do so. So now we need to come up with more money, more volunteers, more food so that we can feed people because we know the food pantry is going to be their next stop.
I saw a report this morning that there was, I can't remember which food, I'm just going to call it a depository, but they've been in existence for 40 years, and for the first time in 40 years, they had empty shelves. That's how grave the problem is. Are you all seeing that your resources are being impacted at a much higher level, that you could be depleted in ways that you have not seen?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, let's say this first. Right now, we are seeing 175,000 households a month. Before COVID, it was 115, 120 on average. So we are now at the levels we were at COVID right now. And I think that's because of inflation, the price that it costs for people to buy groceries. It's expensive for us to buy groceries. So we understand that change is impacting people. And so because we are walking into this crisis at the height of need already, and with things costing more, if it costs more for you and me to buy groceries, it costs more for the Food Depository to buy food as well. So we are having to source differently. Think about how we can stretch our dollar. Think about how we can buy more food in this moment. And USDA is giving less. So, I mean, the crisis is just so interesting. And we have to get creative because people are afraid to come outside because of the guard and the federal presence as well. That they have been in lines outside of the pantry picking people up or taking staff outside of the pantry. So we know people feel threatened. We have so many different complexities that make this challenge precedented, So the height of need, walking into a crisis in the height of need is the worst place you want to be. But that's exactly where we are.
All right, Danielle Perry, Vice President of Policy and Advocacy of the Greater Chicago Depository. Listen, thank you very much for coming on. I'm going to be sending back and asking for you all to come back on, give some updates on things that are happening and things that you would like for us to do. And if you could provide that information so that we can continuously put that information out, we look forward to doing it. But I want to thank you for coming by and sharing this information with us. And anytime that you all want to and have information, you can reach out to me and we'll be happy to have you to come on the program to share that information because it's extraordinarily important.
Thanks for having me. Have a good night.
All right, take care. Thank you very much. All right, folks, listen, it's essential that we understand how our government works and how it impacts us, and that we don't allow for ourselves to get sucked into these cultural conversations that aren't rooted in any real substance or facts. Especially when we're talking about these programs, some people call them entitlement programs. I call them programs where we're responsible for taking care of people. That's the responsibility of the government. That's the responsibility of our government as it states in the faith commitment that I believe in. The Bible tells us that we are to take care of the poor. Jesus spoke about taking care of the poor more than he spoke about anything else, more than he talked about how good we are supposed to be following rules and regulations, taking care of the poor. In fact, there's scripture that says, "Woe unto those who decree bad policies that prey on the poor and the widows." We are responsible for making sure that people who need help the most are taken care of. That's the responsibility of our government. The responsibility of our government is not to make people rich. That is not what the government's responsibility is. The responsibility of our government is to help those who need help the most. And so what I want to encourage all of us to do is to reach into your heart of compassion, for people who need help the most. And don't make judgments about someone that you see that has a cup in their hand on a corner. It takes a lot of energy, and it takes a lot for somebody to stand out on a corner with a cup in their hand asking for your spare change. I do not believe, as some of you would like to purport, that there are people who do this and they are getting over it and driving off in fancy cars and that sort of thing. That's more propaganda than there is any real substance. It takes a lot for somebody to go out and stand on a corner and ask you and come up to your door and asking you for your spare change. I'm not saying that you're responsible for curing every person's need, but I'm simply saying to us that our government has a role to making sure that people who need help the most get the help that they need. All right. So these changes are coming into effect. $4.2 billion, $4.7 billion that comes to the state of Illinois. And now, in order to do it, there has to be a matching fund. So the state of Illinois is going to have to come up with $700 or $800 million in order to make sure that they get the other $4 billion from the federal government. So that means that we're going to have to kick in a little bit more to make up that $700 million and find that $700 million in some place, so that the $4 billion that is needed to make sure that people who need the help the most get that continued help. Because if they don't, it is going to be much more costlier on the states, that there will be people who will literally die because they don't have the support that they need. There will be people who actually go out of business because they cannot provide the sources, because the revenues that they get from the SNAP beneficiaries helps them to be able to provide the resources and the services and access to produce and groceries that otherwise they would not be able to do. So every ma and pa store that you see on the corner, these people are not getting super rich to do this. They're making a living. They're working hard to make a living, but they in large are able to provide those services because they have a source of customers as a result of these benefits. But that's why it's important that you understand how government works, and you learn as to how to connect these dots and to see how they continue to make for a more agrarian society that we all share and contribute into this, not this oligarchy existence that is becoming more and more prevalent in our communities. All right, so I'm going to be continuously reminding us of that. So if you are a person that gets SNAP benefits because you are going to have to meet these new requirements, please make sure that you go to the Illinois Department of Human Services, talk with a caseworker there so that you can update your information so that you do not lose your benefits because your information is not updated. Daniel's going to be providing me with a telephone number that I will continuously post and share on this program so that those that you can share it with people, even if they don't watch the program, but you can share it with people who you know that are on SNAP. All right, we're going to continue our conversation. And then I was talking with Dr. Kimberly Dulaney on the DuSable Museum. This is a conversation that I know that we could talk about for a long time. But it is not just for us to have a conversation about it. It is about, I want to prick your conscience. And I also want to motivate you to get engaged and to ask questions, because we are going to have to do something. There is something amiss. I don't know exactly what it is, but there is something amiss, and we have to do something about it. We have to stabilize the institution. If that means that personnel has to change there, or certainly the way that it is administered. So that's why I am probing and I'm asking questions so that I can get some understanding as best as possible from Dr. Dulaney, what her experience was there, and hopefully we can sort of dig into and pinpoint to where there are some fractures in the administration of the DuSable Museum. Joining me back on the program is Dr. Dulaney. Hey, Kim.
Hello.
All right, welcome back.
Wallace, let me add one thing. I don't know if you saw the number, but Danielle did leave a number. Did you see that?
Okay, so let me make sure that, okay, there's a number. The number is 866-324-5553. So I'm going to keep it there in the chat so that people can do it. And then I will take the number, and I will also post the number so that you will be able to see the number and call. All right, there we go.
Thank you. Listening to that issue, I'm thinking that's the problem right now. We're in a culture where people are fighting for everything, everywhere, So people are fighting for basic sustenance, right? Just food and shelter and things like that. So sometimes it feels overwhelming, which is why people disconnect. But to me, that's why we have to fight for the museum, because if we're teaching history properly, people understand, like when we faced these things before, what did we do? We would hold forums, talk about this history. When we faced this before, what did we do? In one way, even just listening to that, I'm just my quick response to what I heard, even in just listening to that, in one way, we want to say, what do you do with our tax dollars? Because that's why taxes are collected. Taxes are collected to shore up the deficits of the whole. It's not a money grab for some people, and that's the climate we're in right now, right? Where people don't care if other people starve, if other people don't get the money isn't allocated properly. Just the greedy get fatter, And so I think we have to teach people about the history, teach people about civics, teach people about that it's your money, it's your tax money. So you have a right to say something about it. We don't just have to respond just to what people tell us to do. We can have demands. We can hold our, I always thought, like, what if we, how you pay taxes out of your check? It's not due until the April 15th. What if I withheld all of that tax money, and everybody withheld all of that tax money and kept it in an account to pay it on April 15th? But we say, if you're not doing right with it, we're not going to give it to you during the year and then get a return. Instead, we're going to hold it. This is a capitalistic country, and I think capital matters. So when you make statements with capital, it's heard better. So if we all withheld our taxes and said, well, if you're not going to feed the poor, then we'll wait and pay it later. Not saying we're going to break the law and not pay it. We're going to pay it. We're just going to pay it later. And then I think that missed money would make people understand or be reminded of what you collect taxes for. That's where taxes are collected. It's not your money to play games with and just give it to us when you want to. Surely there could be some cleaning up of food programs and food stamp programs and all of those things. But like you all talked about, you can't just say, just clean it there with no jobs. That's what Danielle kind of alluded to. You can't just have no jobs and say, well, we're not going to give you any food. There's a lot to be fixed there. And in a lot of situations, there's a lot to be fixed. Even as we get back to the conversation about DuSable, there's a lot to be fixed. Again, I'm careful to not destroy DuSable, the museum. I don't desire to do that. I have worked for DuSable. I'm a culturalist and care about cultural things. So I'm careful to not talk about some things about DuSable because the goal is not to blast DuSable. My concern is, how does DuSable continue to survive and thrive? I'm not the first person that had a complaint about mismanagement of money, illegal or unethical practices at DuSable. I'm not the first person. I would say I'm the first person that probably couldn't afford to say something about it. I'm a retired professor. I took early retirement, but I still can eat, and so I can say something about it. I do know that other people had to sign NDAs and things, and they had law settlements that they signed and things like that, so they can't talk about it. I can talk about it, and I feel it's my obligation to talk about it, because I'm only in a position to talk about it because of people who stood up before me, who came before me, because of Dr. Burroughs herself, who came up before me. I went today, Mark. I went to Miss Wallace. I went to the Elizabeth Catholic exhibit at the Art Institute, right? And I'm in there, and you see the influence of Dr. Burroughs in there, right? That Elizabeth Catlett stays at her house. That's how she met her first husband and all of these things. And I'm thinking, man, Dr. Burroughs has this rich legacy of helping people, of doing all of this work. Whenever I see things like that, it inspires me again to continue to press that we still move in this legacy. We don't have to harken back to the past and be just like the past. But Dr. Burroughs, as her birthday comes up, November the 1st, what would she have done? She would have held people responsible. She's a builder, and she's also going to hold people responsible. She's known for that. She was very vocal. She's going to speak out. She's going to hold people responsible. My objective is to hold people responsible. I'm not telling people to pick a side on who you like the best or who you drink with. I don't drink or whatever, all that. So you might find camaraderie in one way or another with whichever person. I'm not asking people to look at personalities. I'm talking about the health of the museum and the money of the museum and the laws that are in place. There are laws that govern the way things you can do with the money, So I'm asking people to look at those things.
Yeah, look, I said at the outset, this is not about a personal vendetta or a personal attack on any one person. This is about the institution. It's about the institution. The institution does not belong to the people who was entrusted with administering the institution. But if the people who are administering the institution are doing the institution a disservice, that needs to be dealt with, because the institution needs to be. There's not anything wrong with DuSable Museum of African American History. There's something wrong with the people who are administering it that is causing for the museum not to function in the capacity that it is supposed to, whether that be administratively, but ultimately it is about what the ultimate goal of the institution is to be able to be a beacon of our stories. That should be central. I've gone to many events at the DuSable Museum and participated in events at the DuSable Museum, and to and to some degree, feel somewhat ashamed that, sometimes we walk into these buildings without the appreciation of how those buildings became, how that came into being. That didn't come into being because somebody just had a fat check and wrote a check and it just, voila, it ended. There was a whole lot of prayers and a whole lot of work and a whole lot of cajoling of people with Dr. Burroughs and others that advocated for what we have now to take advantage of and to appreciate. So we have a responsibility there. So for me, it is to make sure that that institution is strong and that all of us have a responsibility to participate into that. So I would say to every person who is listening to this conversation, we all have a responsibility to ask the question and not get sucked into taking sides, but the right side, right? Because because this timeline that I'm reading, the information that I'm reading is very concerning to me. But it's also telling to me that there is a problem. That there is a problem and that we all have the responsibility to call it to the carpet. And if that is, Irma Perry and the board in and of itself, then the community has a responsibility to call that out and to demand for some accountability.
So listen, that's exactly what I would like. People have been calling me. I got all kind of calls. People, community partners that I was working with called me and said, okay, I'm going to cancel my event. We're going to protest by canceling the event. And I initially said, no, don't do that. The event is for the children. Don't pull out because that'll hurt the children. The event is for elders. Don't pull out. That'll help hurt the elders. Later, people called me and said, but nobody will ever know that there's a problem if it continues with business as usual. And that's why it's never gained the momentum it should, because we all care about the museum. So it's just continue, let's keep the work going. But in the interim, nothing is going to be done about the leadership, right? We're just going to say, well, just keep trying to work. So again, I wouldn't call for people to not go to the museum or anything like that. There are groups who are calling for people to boycott, to make the board feel it so that they could do something about it. There's talks about people planning to boycott MIP, Museums in the Park, because we get city funds there. There's a lot of different people talking about doing a lot of things because people are fed up. It's not a Kim thing. I just became the face of it because I am the newest person to be engaged in this type of process, whatever, of Irma's, of getting rid of people who ask questions or who bring up complaints. I'm just the latest person. I'm not the first person. When I first released the press release, there was a couple of newspapers who told me they were already investigating DuSable Museum. They had things they showed me, they sent me, they even published a letter in an article, they sent me other things. They told me about all these other lawsuits. I had no knowledge of those things to that degree like that until after I was let go and after I made a public statement. But it's clear to me, too, that something needs to be done. Something needs to be done with the museum. People need to know that it's private, it's independent, but it gets public dollars. So you do have a say in there. And again, I'm just asking people to investigate. When I contacted the IG's office, I'm a scholar. I come out of academia. So I'm looking for people. I'm wanting people to want to prove. I want you to want to the proof. What I don't want people to do is turn away under this guise of, oh, it's just a disgruntled employee. So, people just get mad because leaders have to lay the law and they're mad. I've been a leader for years. So I'm not mad at leadership style. I'm not mad at a leader for having power. I've been tiptoeing around Perry. I go down the back stairs. I've been doing everything I can to support and respect Perry as the leader. If there is illegal actions, which there were, and unethical actions, which there were, that hurt the museum, then I made a complaint. Since the board couldn't do anything about it, I made complaints to other entities that I assumed could help. And so I'm asking the people have asked me, like, what do I want out of that? Like, what are my goals? I really, and I didn't feel this way at first. This is where I could tell I'm a little surprised and disgusted by all the information that has been given to me since my termination. But I would like to be honest. I would like to see Perry go to jail, and I wouldn't have liked that 6 months ago, because I don't believe in prisons and jails. I believe that people should work things out. But if you are knowingly committing crimes, and then you develop this bravado that says, I can do what I want to do, and I'm going to continue to do it, not a mistake. It's one thing to be incompetent or to make a mistake. All of those things to me are forgivable. We should work with those things, and we should fix those things. We should help people to be better. We should give money and help to be better. But if I am intentionally breaking the law, and then I'm bragging about nobody can do anything to me, I'm undefeated, this is what I do, that's a different level of, I don't even know what to call it. I was going to say evilness, but that's a different level of something. So that deserves to be separated from the people where you can't do harm anymore. So again, I would like for people just to investigate, find out information. There's a forum, a public forum that's going to be held in Dr. Burroughs' honor on November 2nd. Her birthday is November the 1st. On November the 2nd, we're having a public forum. We're asking people to attend, to hear facts, and then to add if you have experience with holding people accountable and you know what to do, or you have solutions so that the museum won't be harmed, we ask you to bring those solutions. Maybe somebody has some other ideas. I've talked to a lot of people have contacted me. I've spoken with a lot of groups.
I think that the thing here is that we can't offer solutions to, if there is an administration that is that's out of control.
Yep.
If there's an administration that's gone afoot, and if Perry Armour, who is entrusted with this position.
Yes.
So when you are entrusted with a level of position, there is a higher level of degree of responsibility that you have. And in this institution, that responsibility is to the entire diaspora. That should be at the very forefront of your every decision that you make about the institution, because it is about the institution and not about you. So when someone takes the attitude, if that is the attitude that they're taking, that I am undefeated, because now you are being self-serving when you're talking about me, myself, and I. That the broader objective and responsibility is now meaningless. You don't care about the institution, much like what we see happening in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely.
That you have somebody going into a rented house and demolishing
Right. Yes.
So this is akin to that. You have a responsibility for serving people. And And I had a conversation. I talked to Bob Starks earlier today because I wanted to get more information, and I'm going to call other people because I want to get more information. And I believe that it's incumbent upon me as a citizen and a responsibility to ask questions, to probe, to do whatever I can to spark attention so that who can will do something about wherever the cracks are.
Right.
Right. So that the institution is saved. I'm really not interested in personalities.
Right.
But if the personalities that are entrusted with the curation and the managing of this institution are failing at that, then there needs to be a change. There needs to be a change. And the only way that we can do that is that we, the people, have to rise up. One of the things that we could do is we could have mass demonstrations outside of DuSable Museum.
There was one this past weekend. There was a demonstration there this past weekend where people picketed outside this weekend, I heard. Yeah.
Well, I think that we're going to have to be more organized about doing things like that and calling for demand. When you put pressure, when you apply pressure, then people have to respond. The only way, the reason why that board and this administration of the DuSable Museum is conducting themselves is because they don't feel any pressure.
Right.
They don't feel any pressure from anybody or from the community at large. That means that we have to bring a certain level of pressure and attention. That maybe that attention brings in the media, that attention brings in investigations, to ask questions, to make them open the books on what is really happening at the DuSable Museum. And if there are people within the DuSable Museum, Perry Irmer, whoever it is, I understand that Carol Mosley Braun is the chairperson over the board, whether it's her, whether it's the board, anybody who is misappropriating resources and funds have to be held accountable, and they have to be put on notice that the community is not going to stand by and allow for you to destroy an institution that you did not build, that somebody else built and entrusted for you to take care of. That's the attitude that we have to have.
So listen, we're asking people. I don't remember the email. I think it's the Dr. Burroughs Legacy found at Gmail, but you can email me at readme4000@aol.com, and I'll forward the email to them so that people, if they want to RSVP to the town hall meeting, right?
Because where is the town hall?
It's virtual.
Where's it going to be held?
It's a virtual meeting. It's going to be held on November 2nd. A virtual, so you can log in. It's a Zoom meeting, and people can log into the Zoom meeting once they're given the link. Log into the Zoom meeting and attend, because again, it's the way that I understand. Like I told any organization that's contacted me, I move with community. I don't move like a dictator. If the community says let it be, to be honest, again, I'm okay. I can let it be.
I don't think that we can. I don't think that we can count tea leaves here. I don't think that we can be a consensus taker. We have to stand on what is right or what is wrong, right? So it's not a consensus. It's not a consensus of what the community says. We need to know as a community what is happening, and so what is happening, if it's not right, then it's got to be corrected. So that's what we have to stand on, what is right or what is wrong.
So in the town hall meeting, we'll share some information, share a screen for some documents for people to see for themselves what the violations are. You see that here's the proof of the violations. Then people can't be, on the fence like, well, I don't know, maybe. It's not a maybe thing. These are facts. You have to follow the trail. Many people have complained before. I'm not the first person. They've settled lawsuits for my same complaint. I'm just the newest one, but I can show documents from my proof from my own experience there at the town hall. And then again, we can move forward. I just don't want people to think that it's like me mad at Perry. It's not that. And again, I go in my office, close my door, and do my work. You wouldn't even be hearing about this if the actions and the things Perry was doing wasn't an impediment to my work. It is an impediment to my work. If you take the funds and don't give it to me for the educational events, that's a problem. That's a problem for me. If you try to make me sign off on something to say I got money I didn't get, I'm not going to do that. I'm old. I'm not going to jail, and I don't
Well,
do
they're what they're doing is that if somebody is asking for you to do something that is illegal, immoral,
yes,
or unconscionable, that person is trying to compromise
right,
your integrity, and that person is not a person that should be in a position of authority or leadership.
yes,
If you're having to avoid a person that you're supposed to be working with for the greater good of the community, then there's a disservice to the community.
mm-hmm.
And there's certainly a disservice to the institution. So this is the point that I'm making, is that it cannot be about us, or it cannot be about any one person.
Right.
The objective is that how do we make this institution tell our story where other people will not, and for the intended purpose that Dr. Margaret Burroughs and others founded this institution for that purpose.
Yes.
Right?
Well, yes. And let me say this. I'm here. I'm going to be, again, like I said, I've been being called to a lot of spaces, but I will say I'm standing for everybody who came before me. And it's because they did make complaints, whether they can make them put their name to them or not. It's because they have done those things that I do have this momentum where people like, oh yeah, I know that's happening over there. Where newspaper articles, I encourage people to read the Crusader. They put out, I think 3 articles. They're putting out another article this week. So they have been really, really, really diligent about that. That was the attempt to handle it in a Black space first. The Crusader is a Black-owned newspaper, 85 years old. The owner knew Dr. Burroughs. And so this is an attempt to handle it amongst ourselves. So I don't want people to be, I'm trying to, as a strategist, you try to knock out all of the naysayers, right? Like, oh, the white people trying to destroy the museum. That's not true. Nobody's trying to destroy the museum. We're trying to save the museum and hold people accountable so that the museum can be its best, right? And so the Crusader has published articles, the Tribe has published articles. I know that there are other newspapers who are working on articles, but again, it was given to Black sources first to give them an opportunity to respond. They have asked the museum questions. They have sought answers. And the museum is not responding. And I'm hearing from the inside, they said it'll go away because it's gone away in the past. But for everybody who came before me, for Pomone, for all the other people that I won't name who I've talked to, thank you for the encouragement. I'm gonna ride it. I'm gonna ride it and stay on it. I'm gonna bring it out and just stay adamant about dealing with the issues that are over there at DuSable.
Yeah. All right. Well, we all certainly need to be involved with this. I think we all now have a responsibility to it, and I think that for me, I probably should have raised it some time back, but that's water under the bridge, and we are at this point now. So certainly, I will be right there with you in terms of asking questions, to getting to the bottom of it, or certainly reaching the people that we need to, whether it be at the state. We may have to, contact the Attorney General, or whatever entities at the state that the maybe it's the Inspector General's office, whatever area that we need to, that has the authority to investigate what is going on within the administration, to protect that institution, then that's what we're going to have to advocate for. And now, if people want to take the little trivial attitude about why are you attacking a black woman, or why are you attacking, all of that nonsense, couldn't be further from just ridiculous. And I really don't, give it a lot of response, that it doesn't matter if you're a black woman or a black man. If you are compromising the black community, you are a problem, and you need and must be held accountable, period. So that's where we are going to be. And hopefully that it gets back to the people at the museum. And, one of my favorite Bible commentators, who has now gone home and was one of my instructors, said that, that if you are doing something in private, then you need to go to God and ask God for forgiveness and quit doing what you're doing.
Right.
But if you are doing it in public, then you owe it to the public to come clean. And so this is where we are with this, and they have to be held accountable to the public. And I'm asking for everyone to be vigilant about this, so that we can protect the institution, and bring about what is right. And certainly, we should not be using an institution that was built by black folks for black people, to tell black people's story to the world, to have black people decaying it, destroying it as if it's their own personal property. That we cannot allow for that to be. They've lost sight of what their purpose is.
I would agree. I want to thank you for having me on here. I want to stress one point, that I wasn't released for anything that I did wrong. That's what I was told at the termination meeting, that it was for restructuring. And then there was no restructuring. I hear that they're now trying to scramble. She's trying to act like there's some restructuring, but this was sheer retaliation. So thank you for having me on here. Thank you for everybody that's been contacting me. Thank you for all of the news that's covering it. Thank you for all the former employees and everything. And the work continues. I appreciate it.
Yeah, the work continues. I'm going to, I looked it up to see these are the, and I wanted to put this out, these are the board members that resigned back in 2018. Chance the Rapper, who is a popular artist, and his father is Ken Bennett, were among 7 board members who resigned in May of 2018. Dr. Eric Whitaker, Wilbur Millhouse III, I don't know who that is, Kimberly McCullough Starks, Michael Gibson, Joyce Johnson Miller, Theaster Gates, who has done great work in the community, Veronica Milton, and Leslie Guy. These are the people who resigned abruptly in May of 2018. And again, we were told on the radio station when I was on air that we couldn't talk about this. And I think that is a disservice to the community. And so we're going to continue to look into this. And you'll get the information for the town hall. Let's all of us participate in that town hall on November the 2nd. We're going to certainly honor Margaret Burroughs on her birthday, November the 1st. That's coming up in just about 5 days.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
We're going to continue this. So thank you very much for coming on and talk about this. And I'll talk to you offline more as we continue to strategize to get to the bottom of it.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you, Kimberly Dulaney. All right, folks. Some other things that are coming up that I wanted to talk about. As you see the numbers for inflation, inflation is getting higher. Grocery is still high, and of course, the incompetent. This has got to be the most incompetent administration, as well as a cabinet in the history of the government, and certainly in our lifetimes. The most, by far, the most incompetent, unqualified folks who are in charge of the government now. And you have a president who is operating as though he is not accountable to the people. He is in a public office. It's not a private office. It is a public office that he is in. And so therefore, he is operating as though he has no responsibility to anybody. Now, if you want to call in and you have some comments, you're welcome to call 951-221-8221, 951-221-8221. And when you do call in, please give us your name and where you are calling for. If you decide to call in, you have something to say about what you've heard discussed tonight. What I'm talking about is I want to talk about tariffs, which is nothing other than taxes. Now, you have seen that there has been an increase. I'm in the real estate business, which means that I'm a private lender, but I also do development or redevelopment, and so which involves construction. And because that involves construction, it means I have to buy material. Material cost has gone up in some cases because of these tariffs, anywhere between 10 and 20%, depending upon what it is that you buy. If you're buying electrical items, it's 20% to 30% increase in cost. Cabinets, 10 to 15% in cost that has gone up, and I can just go across the board. That is another form of a tax, imposing a tax. Now I'm going to play a 5-minute video because I wanted to play the entire speech of Ronald Reagan, 1987, that he gave his what they call a fireside chat that he gave. And I want you to watch this, his speech about tariffs, and then we're going to come back and I want to give you some context of what it is that you have heard from Ronald Reagan, because there is context that you need to go to it. So what he is saying is right, but when we come back from it, I am going to put it into perspective. Take a look.
My fellow Americans, Prime Minister Nakasone of Japan will be visiting me here at the White House next week. It's an important visit because while I expect to take up our relations with our good friend Japan, which overall remain excellent, recent disagreements between our two countries on the issue of trade will also be high on our agenda. As perhaps you've heard, last week I placed new duties on some Japanese products in response to Japan's inability to enforce their trade agreement with us on electronic devices called semiconductors. Now, imposing such tariffs or trade barriers and restrictions of any kind are steps that I am loath to take, and in a moment I'll mention the sound economic reasons for this, that over the long run such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. But the Japanese semiconductors were a special case. We had clear evidence that Japanese companies were engaging in unfair trade practices that violated an agreement between Japan and the United States. We expect our trading partners to live up to their agreements. As I've often said, our commitment to free trade is also a commitment to fair trade. But you know, in imposing these tariffs, we were just trying to deal with a particular problem, not begin a trade war. So next week, I'll be giving Prime Minister Nakasone this same message. We want to continue to work cooperatively on trade problems and want very much to lift these trade restrictions as soon as evidence permits. We want to do this because we feel both Japan and the United States have an obligation to promote the prosperity and economic development that only free trade can bring. Now, that message of free trade is one I conveyed to Canada's leaders a few weeks ago, and it was warmly received there. Indeed, throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. Now, there are sound historical reasons for this. For those of us who lived through the Great Depression, the memory of the suffering it caused is deep and searing. And today, many economic analysts and historians argue that high tariff legislation passed back in that period, called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, greatly deepened the Depression and prevented economic recovery. You see, at first, when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. What eventually occurs is, first, homegrown industries start relying on government protection in the form of high tariffs. They stop competing and stop making the innovative management and technological changes they need to succeed in world markets. And then, while all this is going on, something even worse occurs. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition. So soon, because of the prices made artificially high by tariffs that subsidize inefficiency and poor management, people stop buying. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. The memory of all this occurring back in the 30s made me determined when I came to Washington to spare the American people the protectionist legislation that destroys prosperity. Now, it hasn't always been easy. There are those in the Congress, just as there were back in the 30s, who want to go for the quick political advantage, who risk America's prosperity for the sake of a short-term appeal to some special interest group, who forget that more than 5 million American jobs are directly tied to the foreign export business, and additional millions are tied to imports. Well, I've never forgotten those jobs, and on trade issues, by and large, we've done well. In certain select cases, like the Japanese semiconductors, we've taken steps to stop unfair practices against American products, but we've still maintained our basic long-term commitment to free trade and economic growth. So, with my meeting with Prime Minister Nakasone and the Venice Economic Summit coming up, it's terribly important not to restrict a president's options in such trade dealings with foreign governments. Unfortunately, some in the Congress are trying to do exactly that. I'll keep you informed on this dangerous legislation because it's just another form of protectionism, and I may need your help to stop it. Remember, America's jobs and growth are at stake. Until next week, thanks for listening, and God bless you.
Now, what the president or the former president said about tariffs was correct and is correct, and that is correct to this date. Now, when he said this was in 1987. He had been in office almost 8 years, and he was approaching the end of his term. The problem is Ronald Reagan is the reason that we are in the current challenges that we are in terms of this disproportionate to income inequality, these oligarch states that we find ourselves in, where we have one person who has more wealth than the bottom 52% of households in this country. And the top 1% holds more wealth than 92% of households in this country. When Ronald Reagan came into office in 1980, Ronald Reagan decided no longer to enforce the antitrust laws. He decided that the top tier corporate tax rate should be cut, his whole trickle down theory. And he cut the top tier tax rate from 94% to 30%, which meant that if you are a CEO and you took more than $3 million a year out of your company, that you would have to pay 94 cents in taxes of every dollar that you took out over and above that $3 million. And as a result, that was in place long before Ronald Reagan got there. And as a result, and while it was there, we had a much more of an agrarian society. We produced more of our textile, we produced more of our goods and services here, and we bought very, very little from overseas in Japan or China. And we were able to have stabilized markets and stabilized jobs. So he's at one point speaking out of both sides of his mouth, because he created what he ended up having to impose on Japan. And the reason is because he offshored jobs by allowing for corporations to disassemble here and to offshore labor overseas, because they could produce the same products for pennies that they were paying a person a decent wage here to produce those products, which we were still able to purchase. And we didn't have this inflation that we have. We didn't have the unemployment that we have experienced. And we certainly did not have the disproportionate in income inequality. And we had manufacturing companies here. As a result, Ronald Reagan caused the floodgate of more than 47,000 manufacturers to close up and offshore their manufacturing to China, Japan, and Taiwan. And as a result, there were millions, about 9 million manufacturing jobs that were lost as a result. So he's speaking with a forked tongue, even though he's speaking correctly, but he's speaking with a forked tongue because he produced it. He produced the same conditions that he was trying to correct and imposing, trying to ward off a trade negotiation, when in fact he created the atmosphere for that. Unintended, but that's what was created. So this idea of pointing out that tariffs are bad, yes, he's correct about that. But he contributed to us being in the mess that we are in. So while he gave a speech that was pretty accurate to what is happening now by an administration that doesn't really care nor does he have a real clue of what is going on. He just happens to think in his gut that this is the right thing to do. And we are seeing the results of it. Now, it was reported this morning that some of the corporations, the reason why we aren't paying even higher costs for goods, because some of the corporations decided not to pass on all of those costs to consumers. So let me just sort of share to you how the tariffs actually work. The goods that are exported to the United States, imported by businesses here in the United States, in order for them to import those goods, they have to pay a tax before they can actually take possession of those goods to bring them in to sell them. And because they don't have the funds, they then have to go to the bank. Now they have to pay a tax, whether that tax is 10%, 15%, whatever the tax is. So they have to borrow the money from the bank to pay the 10 or 15%. Then they have to borrow it from the bank at whatever the rate is that they borrow from the bank so that they can pay the tax called a tariff, but it's a tax. Those companies then get their goods and they have to decide on what costs do they have to put on their product in order for them to recover and to be able to sustain and make a little profit. And how do they do that without overwhelming the consumer or even losing the consumer? So that's how it works. Their goods come in, they go to the bank and say to the bank, I need $10 million in order for me to pay the tariff, the tax, in order to get my goods. Because the gangster, I've got to pay the gangster so that I can get my goods. But I got to give them their cut before that I can get my product and then try to recover. And even the gangster says, the criminal, the convicted criminal, the convicted felon says, you eat the cost. So Guido says to the little shop owner, you eat the cost. Don't pass the cost off to your consumers. You eat the cost. Pay me my money, but you eat the cost and don't pass it on to the consumers so that you can keep the prices down. That's not sustainable for most businesses. Not over the long haul. As Ronald Reagan said, that you will see costs will go up and businesses will shutter. And Donald Trump will long be gone, who knows, maybe even to his grave. I don't know. But he is, 78 years old. By the time a lot of this stuff hits, he's going to be much older. And it's going to take a long time to correct the ills that he has put on to the country. So that is how it works. Now, I also found another clip that I wanted to share with you of Barry Goldwater, who was the vice presidential nominee in 1964. This is what Barry Goldwater said in 1964, and all you have to do is to, where is it? I'm looking for my Barry Goldwater piece. Wow. I hope I still have that clip. Where is the Barry Goldwater? Oh, wow. I may have inadvertently edited that clip. I may have inadvertently edited that clip, and I won't be able to get it to tonight, but I certainly wanted you to see that clip. Of what Barry Goldwater said in 1964. And wow, I thought, let's see if I can pull it up. I don't know if I have enough time to pull it up, but I'm gonna try. I'm gonna see if I can get it for you, and we can do it. So, but I thought that I guess I didn't. All right. Well, I won't be able to bring it to you tonight, so I'll bring it to you next week. But I thought I had it, but apparently I don't have it. All right. So, let's go to my daily chronicles. So, on today, the happy birthday, Babs Gonzalez, born 1919 to 1980, born Lee Brown in Newark, New Jersey, was a celebrated bebop jazz vocalist, poet, and cultural icon. Gonzalez began his career as a swing band leader, Jimmy Lee Lunsford's band boy. After moving to Los Angeles, Gonzalez formed his own group, Babs, 3 Bips and a Bop, and became a key figure in the bebop movement, recording with jazz legends like Sonny Rollins and Roy Hines. He was also a self-published author whose books offered raw, unfiltered insights into the jazz world. A charismatic and complex figure, Gonzalez was a chronicler of jazz culture and a voice of the hipster. And my quote of the day. First of all, no, let me find it. Nobody came up with the answer to who am I. The who am I answer was a doorbell. So who said so? This American poet, activist said, if you're always trying to be normal, you'll never know how amazing you can be. Who said that? Maya Angelou. And my quote of the day. I formed the Bips because I felt bebop needed a bride to the people. Babs Gonzalez. That's the quote of the day. All right, that's today's Chronicle. I want to thank you all for being here on tonight's program here on intellectualradio.com and iHeartRadio. We're here with you every Monday night from 7 o'clock until 9. And we'll be right back here again next week for another edition of the People's Show. And great conversation, great guest. We're going to be trying to, we're probably going to be talking about next week. What we're going to talk about is the clean slate legislation. There's legislation that's being proposed for people who have done their time, served their time, so that they can be, their records could be expunged and sealed so that they will be able to go out into the workforce. Also, we're going to be talking about people who are wrongfully charged. We are trying to find out and make sure that those people who are wrongfully charged and should never have been charged, that they don't have to pay to have their records expunged. Their records should be expunged for free. We're going to be talking about that next week on the Monday night edition of The People Show right here on intellectualradio.com and iHeartRadio. Thank you all very much for tuning into the program. I want to thank Dr. Kimberly Dulaney, and thank you, Danielle Perry from the Greater Chicago Food Depository. We'll see you all next week right back here on Intellectual Radio.